darling dream.
There's no coming back for all of us.
Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Talk. I'm John, and today we're here to talk about Guardians, a 2017 Russian superhero flick that was released by Shout Factory way back in December of 2017. But before we dive into that, if you are a fan of movie reviews, 4K Blu-ray reviews, some tech and game reviews along the way, nothing would help the channel out more than by you liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So this review is actually a request from Lord Raiden of House Raiden. He told me about this film in the comment section a few weeks ago. He told me that this is a movie I should check out, that it's a Marvel ripoff, and he just couldn't believe that it got made. And he said it's a movie that I definitely should check out, just in comparison to other Marvel films and the fact that this film is a Marvel ripoff, that I should check it out and make a video about it. So I grabbed the Blu-ray. It actually turned out to only be $8 on Amazon, and I checked this one out last night. And man, there's a reason why this movie is so critically panned and bombed at the box office, is because this is just a flat-out bad movie. Now, it's a fun watch because it's just so unbelievable that this was made. And not only was this made, but this was really expected to be such a big hit for Russia. So before we get too far into this film was directed by Cedric Andrezen. It was released back in 2017, and it tells the story of the Guardians. They're basically mostly a Fantastic Four ripoff, but you could say that they're an Avengers ripoff. They're a combination of a bunch of different superheroes, but these superheroes were all made in a lab back during the Cold War as a way to assist the USSR Army. So all these different superheroes have a bunch of different superpowers. All of them are pretty much very movie cliche and a little bit ridiculous. The most ridiculous is being a character, Arceus. He could turn into a bear. So basically he goes into what he calls bear modes, which is basically he just turns into the Hulk, but instead of turning into the Hulk, he turns into a bear. And that's actually a ripoff of the Winter Guard storyline from Marvel, which is about Russian superheroes. Basically, they're the Red Avengers. You've probably seen, most famously of the Red Avengers is Red Guardian, who we saw in the Black Widow movie, played by David Harbour. But in that group is also another member, Ursa Major, who has the ability, it says on their Wikipedia page, to turn into a humanoid bear. So if that's not a ripoff, I don't know what is. So basically, all these superheroes have all these ridiculous superpowers. One of them can only turn invisible when they're underwater, which is convenient because this movie has a rain scene, and hey, she can go invisible then. Another one, who looks just like the Winter Soldier, has the ability of speed just like Quicksilver, but he also has these two ridiculous looking swords that have to be, I mean, I'm not a swordsman, I've never been an expert with a sword, but I can only imagine that these swords have to be incredibly inconvenient just because of the angle that they're on. They're super round, but I guess with his super speed and everything like that, it doesn't really make a difference. Another guy, this guy Lair, he has the ability to control all rocks and the earth, and that's very helpful for him. It can help him make some armor. He can throw some rocks at people. All of these characters have some of the most ridiculous superpowers you could ever imagine. They were clearly trying to rip off the Avengers, and they were clearly trying to capitalize on what Marvel was doing back in 2017. They wanted their own form of what they were doing. But the problem is, this movie is just so rushed, just has so many different plot holes in it. I mean, right up top, there's just an exposition dump right after the opening credit where it says Guardians, and then they lead into another title card where it says Guardians, where the one actress is about to say Guardians, and it cuts to the title card again. I'm like, you already had a title card. You don't need two within 10 minutes of each other just because you had a gigantic exposition dump. And then we get into the story of this movie, where these Guardians have gone their separate ways. Been a long time, but unfortunately a threat from their past needs to be taken care of. This enemy who looks just like the Thing, wearing leg braces and can control electricity like Jamie Foxx in Spider-Man 2, and he needs to be taken down because he has the ability to control all electricity. He can make a clone army, he can control all the tanks, anything in the army, so he needs to be taken down, and we need to get the old bad back together, and that's why we're going to assemble the Guardians. We're going to bring them in to take him down. We're going to get the guy who could turn into a bear, the woman who goes invisible underwater, the guy with the swords, and the guy who could control all the rocks. We're bringing them in, and they're going to take this guy down. And that's the basic plot of this movie. If you don't want to know anything else about this movie, maybe by chance you want to check this out, this is a spoiler alert for you, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the end, because this movie builds up to this big ending, and then they just had thrown that Deus Ex Machina right into it at the end, because it turns out the only way we could take this guy down, because he's just so strong, because he's basically the Thing, the only thing we can do to take him down is to combine our powers, because the guy who created all these guys in the lab comes out and says, you know what? I didn't tell you this, but if you use all your powers at the same time, you're going to create this incredible beam of energy that's going to take this guy down. But just be careful, because it will probably kill you. But because this is a movie, we know it won't. So of course they get together, they shoot that beam of energy at a building, it ends up knocking him off of it, he ends up falling to his death, and then this movie had the balls to set up a potential sequel. They actually really believed that this movie was going to get a sequel. They set it up, it's got a Marvel after credit scene and everything. And you know what? It didn't get a sequel. Why? Because this movie not only was critically panned, especially in Russia, but just around the world in general as seen as a lazy, very rushed, because this movie is paced incredibly fast because it's only 90 minutes and they have to fit an entire superhero film in that, right from their origin story right to the end of this movie. So they have to start us out and they have to end this story all in one 90-minute film. And you thought Avengers Endgame was long at 3.5 hours? This is the reason why, because they are just rushing through movie cliches, superhero movie cliches, one after one after one. Every single one that you could think of, they try and stuff into 90 minutes of this movie. And that creates a lot of plot holes. You're just wondering exactly what got us to this next scene. They kind of explain it a little bit. Like, there is just one really bad editing mistake in this where our antagonist is talking to somebody and then it cuts to a battle. And the battle lasts for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then it cuts back to the scene right as he was about to say a line. So you almost forgot what he was talking about because we spent so much time away from what they were discussing. You know, usually you would intertwine that a couple times in between that fight scene and them talking. You know, you've seen that basic editing tool where, you know, you talk for a little bit, we get some clips of the fighting, maybe like 10, 20 seconds, and then we cut back to them. Now, they wanted to have him talk, have him stop mid-sentence, go into a battle, and then come back to it. And I was like, I forgot what he was talking about. I had to like re-engage myself with what he was talking about. Now, I did watch this with an English dub, and that dub is awful. Almost no acting or effort was put into actually making this dub seem coherent. It literally just feels like people are reading the lines, except for the guy who did the voice of Lair. I thought he put a little more effort in than everybody else, but everybody else just has no emotion in it. If you're going to put no effort into an English dub, you know, call me. I'll do it. I don't need much money, you know, just give me the bare minimum salary. I could have done better than these guys. I think they just dragged the guy to the audio booth and said, hey, just read this. I don't care. Don't put any effort into it. It doesn't really matter. And that's just exactly how it felt to me throughout this entire film. Was like, they had some ideas, and they did have some good ideas, because this movie actually still does look pretty good. The CGI is not great, you know, it's not, but it's kind of acceptable. It's still better than the Star Wars prequels, in my opinion, but that's a low bar to hit. They did actually try in certain aspects, like, you know, there is some good set design. It's not ugly on the eyes. The colors could be a little flat at points, but it's not like the worst looking movie. Like, when you think of a bad movie, a bad movie doesn't get a $15 million budget like this and fail this hard. This just falls on its face on every which way. I can't recommend this movie other than to say that it's a fun watch, just because it's like unbelievable listening to these characters' dialogue and just seeing like, wow, you know, there really are big budget ripoff films out there. You know, people were really trying to capture that Marvel energy, not just here. We know DC was trying to capture that in the bottle, but they couldn't. But even in Russia, they were trying to get what Marvel has, and you could see it's not that easy. Yes, Marvel has a formula, but that formula cannot be replicated, and they tried. They tried their best to rip them off the best they could, and they did a horrible job. And there's a reason why this film, I think, should be seen, but on the other hand, I'm like, you know, maybe it shouldn't be seen. So it's really up to you. It's not a good movie, but I wasn't bored watching this movie. I had fun watching. I'll probably revisit it. I'm going to want to show people this movie just so that they could see, like, yeah, no, this movie exists, and just look at how much they ripped off Marvel making this movie. So if you haven't seen this movie and you want to check it out, well, good news for you. There is a Shout Factory release of it, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. So it's been 6 years almost. This came out in December of 2017. Shout Factory released this Blu-ray of Guardians. I don't know why they released this other than to bring it to the United States so people could see it, because this has an English dub on it, and it's also in its original Russian language. Both of those, by the way, in English and in Russian, have 5.1 and 2.0 DTS master audio tracks on there. So you can watch this either way you want. You can either watch it in Russian with subtitles, or you can watch it in English with that awful dub. This movie also features a few extras on here, nothing crazy. You know, you get trailers, some interviews with the cast and crew if you're interested. So not too much, no documentary about the making of the film, which would have been extremely fascinating. I'm sure maybe in 10 or 15 years we'll get another Maybe we'll get a documentary of somebody diving into the thought process of making this film, because I'm sure that's fascinating. But before we dive into what the visuals are, I'm going to show you guys what the packaging is. So as you can see, it's just a regular standard Blu-ray release, but I don't know if people remember what the old Shout Factory releases looked like. So if we pop this open, remember when Shout Factory, this was the cool thing about Blu-rays, and Blu-rays, especially from Shout Factory, they always had that interior design because Blu-ray cases are transparent and you can see underneath, so you get that cool look underneath of it, which is something I always appreciated. And since we've gone to 4K with the standard black casing, we kind of lost that, and Shout Factory and Scream Factory themselves have really stopped doing the reversible cover art and all that because, you know, it's kind of pointless. I get it, but for us old fans of Shout and Scream Factory, we really do miss that reversible cover art and being able to see the interior artwork. You know, we kind of lost that when we went to 4K, given the quality of the disc has improved so much, so it's not worth complaining about, but it is definitely something that I personally miss, and I can speak for Matt also, he personally misses, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers, I know especially, really do appreciate that about Shout Factory, and they also really miss it. And the disc design is really nice also. It looks just like the cover, but, you know, I always want to point out when companies take the extra effort to put the disc design on the actual disc. And now, the visuals of this, for a Blu-ray release from 2017, really good. Like I said, this movie had a $15 million budget, so there was a lot of effort put into it as far as making the visuals look good, and the visuals looked great on my screen. I thought that they looked phenomenal. Now, a 4K would obviously make this look better, but I thought that this Blu-ray was actually really good. Like I said, the special effects aren't the greatest, but they do look passable. You know, the scenes are all well lit. There's a lot of outside scenes with, you know, I mean, you know, you can see that they're using a green screen at points, but it still looked really good. Like, the contrast was great. You know, it's not 4K level as far as the skin looks. You know, that's one of the biggest flaws. You kind of get that, like, you know, that flat look of the skin. And there's a scene early in the film when they're in the desert, and it looks flat, but, you know, that's the desert. But I think that if it was in 4K, that would have definitely enhanced it with Dolby Vision and HDR. HDR also would have definitely helped the blacks, because there are points, especially like scenes where it's very dark and, you know, the blacks aren't black, they're a dark gray, and it's noticeable, especially if you've been watching a lot of 4Ks, and you're like, I see where Dolby Vision or HDR would have cleaned that up. But overall, visually, definitely impressive. Especially, you know, there are some bad looking Blu-rays out there, and this isn't one of them. So even 6 years ago, Shout Factory still had their visuals department really just firing on all cylinders, because this is actually a phenomenal Blu-ray. And like I said, I got this for $8 off of Amazon, and for $8, it's still a high quality Blu-ray, even if the film itself is just bad. Now, the audio, like I said, is a DTS 5.1, DTS 2.0 master audio in both English and Russian, and I watched the English dub, and it sounded great, other than the people doing the dialogue. The actual special effects, the sound design was all good. It was making great use of my rear speakers, which I was very much impressed with. You know, the dialogue was crisp and clear. Obviously, with a dub, it might overwhelm the mix at points, and that's no different here because it's not lined up correctly. But it still sounded really good. There's a lot of action scenes in this film, and, you know, it doesn't match up to what a Marvel Blu-ray or 4K would be, but it's still really good, and it'll immerse you if you were into the story, but the audio itself is still very well designed. And that's what makes these reviews very hard, because I'm here to review this Blu-ray disc, but the film itself, I can't recommend it unless you just want to have a good time and watch it. But from a film standpoint, you want to enjoy a superhero film, this is one of the worst. It's probably right up there with Fan 4-Stick. But on the other hand, I went into this knowing that it was bad. I went into this just looking for a good time, just to have fun, kind of making fun of a superhero movie, and that's exactly what I got. So for my $8 that I spent on this for a pretty high quality Blu-ray with good audio and good visuals, and the packaging is really good, it's really hard for me to give this a low grade. If I was just going to rate this on the film itself, I would give the film about a 3 out of 10. But if I'm rating the film along with the Blu-ray, along with the audio, the visuals, you know, the lack of extras, but that great packaging, I'm still going to give this a 7 out of 10 for the $8. If it's still going for $8 on Amazon, we'll leave our Amazon affiliate link in the description below if you want to grab this and check this out for yourself. You know, you really can't go wrong for something that's under $10 and something that's really fascinating and interesting, and you will have a good time for 90 minutes. You know, you're not investing too much time, and if you sit down with your buddies, you have a few drinks, you know, I think you'll have a good time checking this one out. So I can recommend it from that standpoint. Just don't go into it expecting Captain America Civil War, because you will be extremely disappointed. So if you're new to the channel, we do this every single week. We do a digital code giveaway. Friday. So what that means is every Friday in this video, Matt or I will ask you guys 2 digital code giveaway questions. All you have to do is answer one of those questions in the comments section below and you are automatically entered into our giveaway. What you'll do is then you'll come back to Monday's video, we'll put your name on a magic wheel, we'll spin that wheel twice, whoever the wheel lands on, those 2 people will be your 2 winners, and they will have their choice of the digital codes that you've seen on your screen before you today. But what are this week's questions, you're probably asking yourself? Well, I figured in honor of Guardians, what is a bad movie that you have a lot of fun watching? And maybe you're not into bad movies and you've never watched one that you enjoyed. So our second question is going to be, what is your favorite superhero movie of all time? So answer one of those questions in the comment section below. And then while you guys are down there, nothing really helps the channel out more than by you liking this video, subscribe to the channel, and then telling all your friends.